The agenda for today for this evening is as follows. We'll be hearing from our City Council representative, Janani Ramachandran, and also from our Chief of Fire Department Chief Damon Covington, and Fire Marshal Javan Smith. And then we'll have a special presentation from the OFSC on the topic of Zone Zero. And they'll be explaining that buzzword and what it means to you and why it's important. So among the things we'll cover tonight is, in how will Oakland manage fire safety in the context of the difficult budget situation. From the fire department, we'll hear what the biggest challenges are for 2026. They'll give us tips on how you can ensure that you'll pass your vegetation management inspection. We'll get some insight onto the goat grazing schedule. And we'll also hopefully get some insight on what the next steps are for the Wildfire Prevention Financing Act, which is supported by Measure MM that passed about a year ago. Regarding Zone Zero, what these new regulations mean for inspections this year and years going forward. And you'll be getting a more in-depth look at Zone Zero and what it means to you. Councilmember Janani Ramachandran, thank you so much for making time to join us and share with us your view of fire safety in this part of your district.
Much for having me. Good evening, everyone. Janani Ramachandran, Oakland City Council Member, District 4. I was recently elected by the East Bay Wildfire Coalition to serve as chair for the next year for the Wildfire Coalition. Now, the coalition was started back in late 2023, thanks to advocates, including those in this Zoom room today, the Oakland Firesafe Council, the Claremont Conservancy, among others. We are a coalition of 9 regional governments: Oakland, Berkeley, Contra Costa County, Alameda County, Richmond, Hercules, and a few others that band together to figure out ways to address wildfire prevention holistically, because of course fire knows no bounds. Our goal is to share best practices, provide community education, and most critically, advocate as a region for funding for critical efforts related to vegetation management and advocacy when it comes to the insurance market. The coalition has been engaging. So I served as vice chair for the first 2 years, and this year I'm chair, and our goals remain the same of, number one, legislation and budget advocacy. We've shared, I've gone up to Sacramento a few times on behalf of the coalition. We've advocated for funding. We are proactive, again, as a region when it comes to asking for money for vegetation management. Our fire departments do a whole lot, and they have been coordinating and advocating as a region for many years, especially since the 1991 fires. But there's a whole lot more that can be done, and a whole lot of more funding out there, quite frankly. One of the specific things that we've been focused on, and we've engaged with a consultant to do some of this work, is a voluntary education campaign. So the Zone Zero requirements that I'm sure you'll hear more about later in today's meeting will be coming down shortly from the state. And while there are some limitations and some frustrations about how far the state did not go as far as these regulations are, the coalition's goal is to advocate for voluntary adoption of data-backed scientific methods to reduce the risk of wildfire spread for your homes and for your communities. And then when it comes to other legislative advocacy, one of the things that I have been pushing for, and there's actively some legislation at the work, primarily at the state level, a little bit at the federal level as well, and that's homeowner grants for low-income households in the wildfire zones. We are trying to push, we know removing dead and dying vegetation, eucalyptus, et cetera, is not an easy task. It's not a cheap task. Hardening your home is also not inexpensive. These are significant cost measures. So we want to do as much as possible to provide, to advocate with the state to provide grants for homeowners to do this kind of work. And then, of course, on the city front, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, you're imposing all of these requirements on homeowners. Well, the state is. What are you doing to address the city-owned properties. We have thousands of acres of wildland that are filled with dead and dying vegetation that the city has not had the capacity to address. And then in comes Measure MM. In November 2024, I co-sponsored an initiative to put Measure MM on the ballot. Some of the people on this panelist today helped actually bring that to voters. And it's a special tax that's specifically dedicated for wildfire prevention. I'm sure Chief Covington and others will explain a little bit more about how that's going and the tax collection, what the specific uses are. But the primary purpose is, how do we address this on city-owned property when we have a constrained budget? I am also chair of our city's finance committee, and I am co-leading the budget process once again this year. And things like tree clearing on evacuation routes, things like vegetation management, goat grazing programs, et cetera, continue to remain some of the top of our funding priorities. We know that our fire departments have a lot of constraints with aging fleets, for example, but we are trying to do as much as possible to be able to have more capacity to deal with the city-owned property where vegetation management needs to occur. That being said, I will close out on this note. If you have a Firewise community, if you just have a neighborhood group where you want to collect dead and dying vegetation on your own and you want a bin to put it in, please contact my office. I will put my staff's information in the chat when it comes to green waste bins. Just this past Saturday, I was in a neighborhood in the district providing a green waste bin. If you want to do this work on your own as a neighborhood, just let us know. We are happy to help. And I will pause there and pass it back to Peter. Thank you so much.
We move on and hear from Chief Covington. Chief Covington, thank you so much for taking time. We really appreciate your attendance here, and Fire Marshal Smith, thank you so much for joining us as well. And the floor is yours.
I appreciate the opportunity to come speak to everyone. It's always a pleasure. I'll jump right in and talk a little bit about where we are with wildland season. As you know, we really don't have a wildland season anymore. It's pretty much year round, but we're in the thick of it now. Now is when the rain has kind of subsided. We had that last little rain last week that was unexpected, but we expect to be full speed ahead from here. Councilmember Ramachandran talked a little bit about Measure MM, which we want to thank all of our community members for voting for that funding source. As you know, in the past, we just haven't had the funding to do a lot of the work we want to do. We have passed, just 3 years ago, we passed a comprehensive vegetation management plan that kind of charts out our road through the city of all the work that needs to be done throughout the city. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done throughout the city from a vegetation management standpoint. You guys have been excellent partners in creating defensible space around your homes. As you know, we do almost 25,000 inspections annually to make sure that we have created that 100-foot of defensible space around our homes. That just gives us a chance to be successful in the event a major fire comes through your neighborhood. We'll talk a little bit more about Zone Zero in a second. I know we have a presentation, but just in regards to Zone Zero, very briefly, we plan to do a comprehensive education forum for our city and everyone who's going to be affected by Zone Zero. I know Zone Zero has kind of been like the boogeyman in the room for a couple of years now, but we want to make sure that everyone in our community knows that we're going to partner with you. This is not meant to be punitive in any way, but this is scientifically backed, a scientific way for us to create as much buffer between major fire and your home as we can. And all we're trying to do is keep our community safe, and have a true community-based fire service where we're partnering, the community is partnering with the fire department to try and keep our city as safe as possible. In regards to Measure MM, we're in full swing with Measure MM. It's been a little bit clunky to begin with because it was some back and forth about who the funding would go to, whether it would go to the fire department, whether it would be in public works budget. It ended up in public works budget. So we have been working diligently with them really hand in hand to get the program off the ground. There are some very specific parameters for Measure MM, some positions that need to be hired, some contracts that need to be executed so that we can do the work. This, just to be clear, this is not work that the fire department will do. We'll contract this work out. As you guys mentioned earlier, there's tons of eucalyptus around the city. There's Joaquin Miller alone, is is a substantial amount of work that needs to be done in the park. So we have very specific marching orders with our vegetation management plan, and we plan to utilize that. However, as Councilmember Ramachandran said, our evacuation routes are at the tip of the sword for us. That's where we're kind of jumping to. We want to make sure in the event of a major fire, we can get our constituents out of the hills and we can get into the hills safely. And that was one of the takeaways from the 1991 fire, is that there were major choke points in our hills because as people were trying to get out of the hills and as the fire department was trying to get into the hills. So we want to make sure that we have done our due diligence to clear those evacuation routes and make sure we've secured those so that we can get everyone safely out of the community as we go in and fight the fire. So Measure MM is the funding source for all of that work. Previous to passing Measure MM, the city's budget for wildland intervention was the goat grazing contract and the firefighters doing the frontline defensible space inspections. That was pretty much the what was happening from our city's perspective in regards to wildland. So this measure gives us another funding source to not just have the goats, but to actually be able to do roadside clearance and a lot of the other measures, fall dead and dying trees, all of the work that needs to be done that the vegetation management calls for, the plan calls for. This will be the funding source. It's not enough money. It's nowhere near enough money to do all the work that needs to be done. What we are also doing, and Assistant Fire Marshal Smith will expound on this, is we're looking at this from a regional perspective. We have a lot of the same issues that Alameda County has, that Berkeley has, and we're trying to, we've done a great job. The Oakland Fire Department staff has done a great job year over year applying for and receiving grants, CAL FIRE grants. We've done a lot of if you've looked at the corridor on the 24, Highway 24 corridor, some on the 580 corridor, falling a lot of dead and dying trees. Those are just kind of baby grants, though. They're grants that when you start falling eucalyptus, the money goes really quickly. So we want to apply for much larger grants, and we're looking at doing that from a regional perspective, partnering with our neighboring fire departments to apply for grants as one unit, so that we can get larger grants and we can do a larger amount of work throughout our geographic region, not just in Oakland, but throughout Alameda County, Berkeley, and our adjoining fire departments and regions. Because, like you said, the fire knows no boundaries. So we're partnered together. We've done a really good job partnering with all of our Alameda County partners, and that was apparent at the Keller fire 2 years ago, where we were able to, get a stop on a fire that really could have devastated our whole city. And that was because the partnership and the training that we've done with surrounding jurisdictions, as well as CAL FIRE, who came and got there immediately. Over 20 different departments came to help us mitigate that incident. So it really is, the efforts that we're doing are not in vain, and they're working. With that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Fire Marshal Smith, and then we can answer questions.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. As the chief mentioned, we have a very robust wildfire prevention strategy here in the city of Oakland, and the fire department and its partners and city leadership is really, we take this seriously. And so there's a number of avenues that we use to get the job done. And I know one of the most visible are the goats. People love to see them, and they do a phenomenal job. Where they are currently is Hiller Highlands. You may see them if you're entering the tunnel heading east or coming into the city from east of the hills. This particular season started a little behind just because of that last burst of rain that kicked us out just a little bit, not a lot, but just about a week behind schedule um, for the goats. The goats are currently at Hiller Highlands. They were scheduled to be done around June 15th. We'll see if we can still meet that. But that was the goal. We do have uh, a goat grazing schedule that's put up, which identifies which regions they'll be in and what dates and what times, how long that'll take. And it looks like we're going to be all the way up through the end of August is what's scheduled. And that probably will push a little late because we started late. So probably beginning of September before they finish up their complete route. Um, but they do great work. And this year we have a larger herd than we have had in previous years. So um, we're expecting them to stay pretty close to schedule, not be too far off.
Question about volunteers, directed maybe at the fire chief. People want to know what roles volunteers can play. Is that something that can be done, or is it all to be contracted out with licensed jobbers?
Yeah, there's multiple volunteer opportunities. In fact, we just not from a wildland perspective, but we just graduated one of our largest CERT classes yesterday down at the training division. We had over 65 people completed the whole weekend course. For those who don't know what CERT is, it's a opportunity to get training and equipment for when a major disaster hits our city. If an earthquake were to happen or a major wildfire, we would be so tied up with the event that we would not be able to make it to the 911 calls that are coming in to our center. And we're relying on community members to take care of each other. Skills such as stopping bleeding or splinting, a leg or an ankle if someone was hurt, turning off your gas or your neighbor's gas to their home so we don't have explosions. Very basic skills, but skills that really will be valuable in the event of a major situation in our city. And so those CERT programs are totally voluntary, and they need someone to take the leadership for your community because you're going to be on your own. You can expect to be on your own without 911 services for 48 to 72 hours in the event of a major earthquake or any type of major event where resources are thin and there's no other fire departments or emergency services coming because they'll all be attached to their own community. So we really need you to be able to help your community and help your neighbors for 2 or 3 days until we can finally free up resources to get to those 911 calls that come in. So that's one way that you can volunteer and help us throughout the city to make us more a safer city. And we have all of the different groups throughout our city do vegetation management. We do weed abatement. We do all types of through Piedmont Pines and other associations where we're getting invasive species out of our areas. We're pulling weeds. There's a lot of different opportunities. And if you go to our City of Oakland Fire Prevention website, as well as the Firesafe councils, they have opportunities all the time for constituents to get involved.
Assistant Marshal Smith, do you want to say you were about to move on to another
Yeah.
topic, maybe? Or
Yes, the other topic was inspection schedules for homes, which we've gotten a lot of questions about. So fire inspections will begin June 12th. It's a Friday. And I know that sounds like a strange day to start. There's a reason behind that. The reason starting on a Friday this year is the inspections are batched by fire station and fire shift. So different shifts and different stations are received allotments of inspections to accomplish. And so just for continuity and easy tracking, it's important that we start on an A shift. We have 3 shifts in the city, A, B, and C. So starting on an A shift was important. And the way the schedule landed, that week is when we want to start it, but that A shift was on Friday. So we got to get some questions on why we're starting inspections on Friday. Well, we run a 24-hour operation. So to us, it doesn't matter the day, but that's why, just in case people are wondering. So home inspections start on Friday, the 12th. A question that was raised was how does an individual know when their inspection is? And I think some had some issues going onto the ACA portal to see. It is there, it is posted. The ACA portal, it takes a few steps to get there. One more thing. It was mentioned earlier about evacuation routes. And evacuation routes are super important, vital. This has been proven in every large wildfire incident that's happened in the recent past. And so it is a priority in the vegetation management plan and to use MM funds to clear evacuation routes of vegetation. I want to just point out that another conversation we're having, and the chief mentioned Jessica File, who's done tremendous work in our EMSD emergency management division with planning and plotting emergency routes and giving us the mapping to do the work. And I'd like to just mention that these evac routes extend past the hills. You need a place to go. It's not enough to get down the hill. When you have mass evacuation, once you get down the hill, you have to get away from the hill so others can come down as well. So in that mapping, large thoroughfares are part of the evacuation route map that include Broadway and Telegraph and Park and streets that are below the hills because they are important in the moving of people. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that when we're discussing evacuation routes and when you and your constituents are aiding us in our efforts to keep these evacuation routes clear, you understand that we're not just talking about Thornhill, we're not just talking about Ascot, we're talking about the streets those smaller streets feed and making sure those stay clear and open. So when we do have to do a mass evacuation, we can move those individuals not just out of the hills, but then away to safety. So I just want to make that clear that our evacuation routes extend further than just the streets in the hills.
Peter, if I could just bring up one more topic very briefly. Sure. Is you guys emailed about red flag days. Red flag days are days when it's kind of a perfect storm day. Relative humidity is low and the winds are 30 to 40 miles an hour. It's prime for a large scale fire. When we had our last Keller fire, it was a red flag day. The red flag days are not something the fire department determines. That's determined by the National Weather Service. And they decide what red flag days are if they meet this particular perfect storm environment. We have to begin to socialize and metabolize what that means for our very high fire severity zone community. One of the takeaways from the 91 fire was people were parking on both sides of the street, and it was impossible to get some fire service apparatus into the fire area because we just couldn't get by. And we saw the same thing in the Palisades fire, where they had to bulldoze cars out of the way to get fire resources into the impacted area. So when we have red flag days, and we're going to send this out, we'll talk a little bit about AC alerts too. We're going to send this out continuously via AC alerts and other forms of communication, letting you know on red flag days, you have to clear your cars from those areas that we're not supposed to be parking. We're going to start by coming through. We're partnering with the Department of Transportation and giving you a warning on your windshield. But a warning will turn into a ticket, and a ticket will turn into a tow because we don't have any other way of ingress to the impacted area if people are parked on both sides of the streets. And trust me, I get how impactful that is for a lot of communities where there's not a lot of area to park in those communities. And there's, parking on the sidewalk and parking on both sides of the street. There's not a lot of options. But we're asking you on red flag days to be aware and move your vehicles on those days, because those are the days that we're most susceptible as a city to a large scale fire. And we have to be able to get our resources into the impacted area as quickly as possible.
Someone's asking maybe the fire chief to advise them if they were spending money on going beyond just home safe improvements, fire safe improvements around their home, as opposed to a sprinkler system. Would you recommend they try to get a sprinkler system which could save their house in the event of a fire?
We're really pushing because here's the science behind it. If you go on the website, on the state website on Zone Zero, they give you some very impressive videos of what a Zone Zero compliant home, how it's impacted by fire versus one that's not Zone Zero compliant. And so it's not just your home. So if you put a sprinkler system in, that's fantastic. It will protect your home, but it won't protect the rest of the community, because we're trying to prevent the spread of fire from one house to the next. And that's really what terrorizes whole communities, is when the fire is spreading so rapidly from one home to the next. So a sprinkler system is great, but it doesn't replace Zone Zero, which is going to protect the entire community from, hopefully, from it spreading so quickly.
One mile throw in, because the question two people just asked it about parking issues. No signs for no parking on evacuation routes in particular, especially when they're narrow. Is that something you've requested DOT to do, or does it take months or years to get it done? Or
Yes to all of those.
Yeah.
We have definitely requested. We're working with DOT, specific evacuation routes, specific streets where we know they're extremely narrow. There will be signage up. It will not be a mystery. We're not just going to come around and start ticketing you just randomly. We do have to work on our signage and making sure that everyone knows this is part of an evacuation route. And on red flag days, we need to clear this route completely. So that is coming. It does take a while, as everything in the city tends to take a while, but we are working on it, and we're definitely going to make that happen.
Chief Covington, Assistant Marshal Smith, thank you so much for that. I want to move on to the presentation from the Oakland Firesafe Council. Wendy Goldsby is the president of the Oakland Firesafe Council. Elizabeth Stage is on the board and was a central mover and shaker in the Oakland Firesafe Council for years. And I invited them to give us their take on the state of play with Zone Zero. So they're going to explain what Zone Zero is and why it matters to you. Wendy, Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. All right. Well, thank you for having us. We're going to start right away with a little definition about what is Zone Zero, in case there is someone out there who doesn't know what it is. It goes by several different names. You might have heard it referred to as the amber resistant zone, the 0 to 5 foot zone, non-combustible zone, immediate zone. Basically, what Zone Zero is the 0 to 5 foot perimeter around the structure or your home, including attached decks. You can see the picture here. There's that Zone Zero. It's marked with the 0. There are other two zones here. Zone 1 that goes 5 foot to 30 feet, and then Zone 2 that goes out 30 feet to 100 feet. These are all part of defensible space, and Zone Zero is an important component of defensible space. And defensible space is really the buffer between the structure or your home and combustible vegetation that can help slow or halt an approaching fire. We do have a lot of guides, as Peter mentioned, on our website, and one of them is guide number 13. It kind of clarifies a little bit more what defensible space is all about and how you can do some fire-wise landscaping. So next, I want to give you a little context of how we got here and why this is becoming so important. So wildfires in California are increasing. They're increasing in frequency and severity. So you can take a look at this graph here. This is from CAL FIRE. It's from their statistics page. And it shows you that since 2015, we've seen a real uptick in wildfires that have a lot of severity associated with them. And severity is really defined by how many acres were burned, how many structures were destroyed. And you can see we're really beginning to 75% of the most destructive fires are occurring since 2015. So California State, in response to this threat, has been very, very proactive in drafting a lot of legislation. There's already legislation on the books for the Zone 1 and Zone 2 of defensible space. Those were adopted in the early 2000s. Now, since 2020, there's been a new law that was created called Assembly Bill 3074, which brought into play Zone 0. So wanted to include Zone 0 as part of the defensible space regulations. A couple other bills have followed, and all of these laws actually have directed California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection to actually develop defensible space regulations to include for California state. So they've been tasked with this project to define what this means and how it's going to be implemented. And last year, as you recall, we had the very devastating fires in Los Angeles. And as a result of that, Gavin Newsom wanted to step up the pace. So he issued an executive order that asked for the completion of these laws here around Zone 0 by the end of 2025. So why are we having so many wildfires? Climate change is upon us. And I want to remind you of some very basic science around fire. Fires exist only when there is fuel, oxygen, and heat. That's called the fire triangle. If you have a catastrophic wildfire, there's another triangle that they fit on top of that. Again, there's fuel that you have to have. You have to have certain weather conditions, and you have to have the right kind of topography or terrain. So climate change is bringing all these to us. We're increasing temperatures. We're getting more and more dry vegetation. And we're also still seeing very low humidity and strong winds from the east. They're called the Diablo winds up here, and in Southern California, they're known as the Santa Ana. So Fire Chief Covington, he talked about red flag warnings. These are the conditions that make it right for fire. So you all should be aware of that when you see an alert from AC Alert, and hopefully you all have signed up for those alerts. And if you don't know how, again, we have guides on our website. You can find out how to do that. But that says those are the time when we really need to be aware. And that's, of course, when we have those ripe fire conditions that the fire triangle tells us is going to make for a fire. So that's your basic science. On top of that, we've also had a lot of people that are living in what we call the wildland urban interface. The population has really taken off in these areas, and that brings in a human element to all this. So that brings in additional sources of ignition, like sparks from yard equipment, lawnmowers, vehicles, fireworks, and also arson. These are becoming major sources or major reasons why these fires start in the first place. So all these things are contributing to a lot of catastrophic wildfire. There's excellent reference here that explains a lot of this that I encourage you guys to check out. So what are the ways wildfire can impact your home? There's 3 different ways. One is by direct flame contact. So the wildfire finds a pathway to your home, finds a nice fuel pathway. Here in the diagram, you can see it's following a line of trees right to the house. It can also follow fences. That's another pathway. And then ignite your house. Another way is the fire ignites a structure that's near your home. And that burns with such intensity and heat that it causes your home to spontaneously ignite. It's a process of auto-ignition, and then your home burns down from that radiant heat. And then last but not least, there's embers. So wildfire may be several meters away, miles away, but it produces a lot of embers, little particles of burning material. They fly through the air, and they land on your property, and they find a source of fuel right next to your home, and ignite and transfer that flame to your home, and then burn your home. 60 to 90% of structure loss from wildfire is actually due to embers. So that's something to think about when we're thinking about Zone 0. Zone 0 has been identified as the most important way to reduce the risk of structures and igniting during an ember-driven wildfire. How does it do that? Well, it's thinking about trying to remove the fuel from those vulnerable areas around your home. So if you look at this picture here, this is from LA. You can see all the embers are kind of concentrating at the base of this house. So the embers fly through the air, they land on the roof. They also hit the walls of your house and they drop right to the ground, right in that zone 0 perimeter. And then you can see the bottom picture here on the left. It starts to ignite the plant material, the flammable materials that are down at the base here, and that transfers the fire to other more vulnerable things on your property, on your house, plastic downspouts, plastic gutters, etc., and it burns your house. Another way that Zone 0 can help is it blocks those pathways for the fire to get to your home. There's a picture down here on the right-hand side that sort of shows that. This is a grass fire from Texas. The grass is ignited, went down the hill towards the fencing community, ignited the fence, traveled along the fences into the home, burned the home. So that's how that works. And with the Zone 0 regulations that they're proposing, this would essentially be blocked. The last thing that it can do, and there are experiments that showed this, which is kind of interesting, is if you take away the flammable materials back from the house, it effectively lowers the temperature around the house. So that takes away that last possible mechanism of how fire can get to your house through radiant heat. So the bulk of evidence shows that keeping fuel away from your home really lowers the risk of home ignition. There's been a lot of studies. We talked about science, talked about basic science, but there's been a lot more science that's been done to show this is really a true effect. There's been observations from firefighters captured by their video. You can see an example here. A lot of laboratory experiments. You can see an example in this picture. And then post-fire observational studies have been very important as well. You can see this picture where around the house there was a lot of shrubs. They burned, but they also then transferred that flame to the roof of the house and caused a lot of damage. So I want to show this video. This is an example of a lab study. This is from the Institute, the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety. They've been responsible for doing a lot of these tests. And this is an example here of what happens. So on one side, you see a home that has no Zone 0. It has a combustible fence, a trellis. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side, is a home that has been hardened. It has the Zone 0 in place. It has a metal fence. And you can watch and see what happens. This is a time-lapse video, but it won't take long, so don't worry. We'll be over soon. So you can see the damage that's happening with the ones outside of the houses that are not really well prepared, and it burns down. Oops. All right, so where are we with the draft rule for Zone 0 now? So back in the early 2025, when they got the edict from Governor Newsom, around the middle of the year, they put out a draft plead, and basically what they were asking for within that 0 to 5 foot perimeter to clear the area of any combustible materials, anything that can burn. So anything that can, that's your fuel. That means anything like plant material, grasses, shrubs, fallen leaves, wood chips, mulch in particular. The only exception for plants was small plants in non-combustible pots, no bigger than 5 gallons, no taller than 18 inches, and spaced well apart. Also, firewood needed to go, combustible trellises, structures within that 5 foot zone. They were made of combustible materials. No way, they had to go. Also for fences and gates, any combustible fence attached to a home needed to have a 5-foot piece substituted in for that combustible section at the point of attachment from the home 5 foot out. Same with gates. They also had to be made of non-combustible material at the point of attachment out 5 feet. Trees needed to be 5 feet back from the house, trimmed 10 feet from chimneys and 5 feet from the roof. And they were asking, once the rule was adopted, for new construction, comply immediately, and existing homes needed to comply within 3 years of adoption. So where are we now? Well, obviously we missed the statutory deadline at the end of 2025. The Board of Forestry started to get a lot of pushback, especially from Southern California. And they started to soften their options a little bit in terms of what they would suggest in the ruling. Then they sort of took a break. They decided to stop the meetings. They took a break to assess the situation, look at the cost implications, analyze the reactions from the public. And then in April of this year, they issued a new draft law, April 17th this year, and then followed that with a new public meeting, on the 23rd of April. So we're now into a short public comment period until mid-June, when they'll, at the end of that point, they're going to bump it up to the main board at the Board of Forestry to vote on it. And they're targeting finalizing this regulation by July 7th. So optimistic, we'll see. It might get delayed further depending on where it goes with the. So what does the current draft rule say? This is the April version of this year. Well, the main issue that they heard back from people, aside from the plants, a lot of pushback on the plants. Nobody wanted to get rid of their plants in Zone 0. Was also, it was one size fits all, and a lot of people didn't think it was going to work for many different environments, many different homes. So the board took a look at that. They thought about the different environments, different structure types. They also evaluated the costs, and they came up with a new idea. Summary of this draft regulation, actually, I've got the link here so that you can check it out and read the full thing as you desire. But what they did actually is they took the 0 to 5 foot zone there, and they established 2 areas within that zone, a non-combustible vegetation-free zone that went from the wall of the house to the edge of the eave or the drip line. And where the eaves were pretty shallow, then it would be at least 1 foot from the edge of the wall, 2 feet from around the windows, doors, and vents, and 5 feet from attached decks, stairs, and pergolas. The second zone within Zone 0 was the low combustibility zone, and that extended from the eave or the drip line through the remainder of the 5 feet of Zone 0. They've also given us more time to comply. So for existing homes, that is, actually new constructions, they need to comply immediately once the rule is adopted. But for existing homes, they've given us a bit more time. So 3 years for less complicated or less costly items to deal with, and 5 years for the more complicated or costly improvements. So let's take a look at what these actual requirements are. So for phase 1, this is within 3 years of adoption. Remove combustible mulches, dead plant material, fallen leaves, needles, wood chips, firewood, stored wood from within that zone. And it also include getting them out of roofs, rooftops, and gutters. Also getting all the combustible materials out from under decks, pergolas, and stairs. They want the trees trimmed back 10 feet from the chimney, 5 feet from the roof, and away from the eaves. They want to make sure that the trees are free from dead and dying branches, and that the lower branches are trimmed up off the ground to prevent any kind of laddering. Then also you have that time to establish a low combustibility zone where some plants would be allowed. And we'll talk about that in a minute on the following slide. In phase 2, that's within 5 years of adoption, establish that safety zone where no combustible materials, including vegetation, can exist. They also, by that time, want any structures within that zone 0 to 5 feet, to be made of non-combustible materials. For fences and gates, they stuck with a 5-foot non-combustible section where the fences or gates attached to their home or come within 1 foot of the home. And then also no new combustible fences could be built within 5 feet of the home. However, they did say that existing fences that are combustible could be repaired. So this is what it looks like. This is from the Board of Forestry. Here's a home. It has 2 different kinds of eaves, more shallow eave and a little bit wider eave. And you can see the eave that extends out here, it extends out 2.5 feet. So within 2.5 feet, they don't want to see any combustible materials. And from 2.5 feet out to 5 feet, you can have certain plant materials. Same for the shorter eave. Under the eave, that's a 1-foot border here, nothing there. But some plants out here, you can see there is a tree, in fact, in zone 0, but no branches under the eave. And branches need to be 10 feet away from the chimney, 5 feet away from the roof. So what's acceptable vegetation? This is what's currently been mentioned by the Board of Forestry. So basically, you can have non-woody, herbaceous, smaller plants. They gave some examples: begonias, poppies, succulents. These are allowed only in spaced groupings. Potted plants are allowed. Again, they need to be small, less than 18 inches, and a 5-gallon maximum pot-sized pot made of non-combustible materials. The idea is that you can move this during a red flag day. The spacing requirements to be specific. Again, smaller plants, less than 18 inches, no greater than 1 square foot in area around it. And they need to be separated by at least 1.5 times the height of the tallest plant. Ground cover is allowed, low-lying ground cover like creeping thyme or mosses. Lawns are allowed, but they need to be well maintained, watered, and mowed to 3-inch maximum height. Again, trees are allowed as long as they're trimmed back according to the regulations. And again, they don't want anything under the eaves, the decks, under the pergolas, near windows, vents, or doors. Bear in mind that plants do change with time. So those small plants that you plant there can evolve into some pretty big woody messes. You can see pictures here. This is thanks to Jana on the Board of Forestry. Her presentation shows this progression. So it's something, maintenance is very, very important for zone 0. Maintenance is key. You got to keep redoing your yard, redoing those plantings to keep them young and viable. Firesafe Marin has a really nice guide of fire-safe plants, more fire-resistant plants. I urge you guys to check that out. There's a great guide there for plantings. So what is Oakland going to do? Well, we don't quite know yet. We have our fire marshal and our fire chief here. But once this is adopted by the state, it comes to the city to work out how it's going to implement it. Zone 0 regulations are required in what we call the state responsibility areas and very high fire severity zone in local responsibility areas. Local responsibility area is inside of Oakland. So Oakland is maintaining its current map. You can see a picture of it here, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief. But this is the current map that we have for Oakland that shows the very high fire severity zone. And this is what would be required to follow Zone 0 regulations once they're adopted by the state and by the city of Oakland. The current draft rule allows local governments to implement alternative practices that are substantially similar to what the state regulation is saying or stricter. So we do have some flexibility, but I do think that there's going to be a real push to try to collaborate and make whatever Oakland rolls out consistent with a lot of the other East Bay local district jurisdictions have done. So there's going to be some coordination, I'm sure. And Oakland, I believe, is looking to implement this in 2029, provided the state moves on it when they say they're moving on it in this July. And they are planning a phased, just the chief said, they're going to work with us. They're going to provide education over these 3 years to help us understand what we need to do and what's best. There's also a communication plan being developed by the East Bay Wildfire Coalition of Governments. This is what Janani, our councilwoman, is now chairing. Thank you very much, Janani. But they're working on trying to get consistent messaging developed for our entire community across the East Bay. Just a reminder, we are starting those defensible space inspections as mentioned earlier. So check your mail and check for the date as instructed. The Oakland Fire Department also has a good website, and they do have information that they're posting on there about Zone 0. So a big question comes up is, will Zone 0 be the magic sauce that keeps my home standing in the event of a wildfire? And it is very difficult to predict an outcome from a wildfire. There's a lot of variables involved. Basically, the answer to that question is probably not. There's no single action that ensures a home survivability, but there has been a lot of evidence to suggest that a combination of mitigation measures is pretty effective in reducing the risk to your home to burn. So there's a paper that was put out in Nature. This is Michael Gollner and also his associates in Nature. They looked at a lot of post-fire data from tubs, camps. They looked at the homes that survived, they looked at the homes that didn't survive, and they compiled it all into a huge model, and they spit out this one of these tables here that you can see where no mitigation done, 80% of the houses will be lost. If you only do hardening, maybe 75% are lost. You save a little bit more. Zone 0 only, it's a little better. Hardening plus Zone 0, you're increasing your odds even more. And hardening Zone 0 plus the rest of the defensible space, it gets even better. So it's a good idea to start now and try to get some things done. So some key takeaways. Zone 0 is coming. It's coming soon. And creating defensible space with Zone 0 and home hardening are critical for your home and personal safety. So we recommend that you start now. Start working on your property. Start from the home and work outward. Anything you do is better than not doing anything. It's also very good to get to know your neighbors, work with your neighbors on trying to create a more resilient community. That's what fire knows no boundaries, as the chief was saying. We got to work together as a community. That's the best way to, in short, immunize our community against wildfire. We have this good program, Firewise. We have a number of Firewise communities now in Oakland, and we do help sponsor Firewise communities, neighborhoods to become Firewise recognized. So check out our website. We have a lot of information there. We have a guide for how to become Firewise. We have more information about alerts, evacuation procedures, etc. Lots of things on our website. Other sources that you can look at: CAL FIRE, IBHS, Firewise Marin, Firesafe Marin. We're here for you. Zone Zero doesn't have to ruin your home and the way it looks. This is a picture from, again, the Board of Forestry, before and after picture. Before Zone Zero and after Zone Zero, you can barely tell the difference. So here's our information. Certainly reach out to us. We are happy to come talk with you more about home hardening, more about ways to do that, more about how to create that defensible space, ideas about how to do Zone Zero, etc. So we also are nonprofit, and we would be more than happy to accept any donations. And we also have Elizabeth here. She went to all the meetings, stuck it out. Any words of wisdom from you, Elizabeth?
Not really. I'd just like to underscore the theme of everything I heard, which is about community. And it's basically about starting with your own home and your own family and going out in concentric circles. And that includes not stopping at your property line, but in fact, encouraging your neighbors and creating a Firewise community. And then your nearby parks, as Chief Covington said, and Lynn Barron is the coordinator of this activity, the Oakland Wildland Stewards, called the Owls. There's a group associated with all of the Oakland City parks in the wildland area. And so the removal of invasives and highly flammable, mostly plants, not so much on the trees because that's a different story, but the French broom for sure. The removal of the plants and the replacement with native plants or plants that are better suited to the environment and less flammable. There's so many good examples and there's so many opportunities to get involved. So the city has restrictions on who can use a weed whacker and all that, but there's plenty of room for just old-fashioned weeding and planting. Whether or not you like the ideas of Zone Zero, once the Oakland Fire Department decides what it's going to do and gets the city council's blessing, it's basically going to be an educational process. And I think, as Wendy said, whether you like it or not, we have a chance to decrease the likelihood of wildfire promulgation in our communities. If 80% of our homes are as prepared as possible, which is not 100% guaranteed, we can have something similar to immunity in the sense that homes that ignite are isolated by homes that don't. Think of it as helping, yes, your likelihood of saving your house or reducing the damage to your house, but also your neighbors and your friends do it together.
And if you want us to come and do a wildfire preparedness workshop for your neighborhood, we're happy to do that. And you can request that also through info@oaklandfiresafecouncil.org.
If I could add one thing that got touched on, and I want to make sure that we call it out, is AC alerts. We've kind of touched on it briefly throughout all of the entire evening, but in Oakland we have close to 450,000 people, and we have about 60,000 people on AC alerts.
Oh my
So
gosh.
AC alerts is the alerting system for the entire Alameda County, but specifically for Oakland, in the event of anything happening in our city, AC alerts is going to be one of the main ways we reach out to our community to tell you what's going on. So it's completely free. You go to acalerts.org, you put in your information, and all of the alerts and information comes directly to your phone or whatever device you sign up with. And if anything were to happen and you hear the sirens going off in the city, well, the sirens tell you something's going on, but it doesn't tell you exactly what's going on and what the direction is from the fire department or city administration of what exactly we need you to do, what evacuation routes we need you to take. So if you just sign up for AC alerts, we should really have 100% compliance throughout our city, because it is such a vital way of communicating, and one of the main ways that the city is going to communicate you in the event of a disaster. So please go to acalerts.org and sign up immediately. Also, have your go bag ready, right? It's not when something happens, when you get that AC alert, that's not the time to start rummaging through your closet and throwing things in a bag. You should have a bag packed and ready to go with all your pertinent information, and what if you have animals, whatever, all of that should be ready to go. So that in the event of a disaster of some sort, and you get that AC alert, you can grab your go bag, get in your car, and head to the evacuation route. I'll turn it back over to you, Peter.
We've got a couple of minutes. Stan, anything else that really stands out?
Someone asked whether the zone zero will begin then, if it passes state legislation, will begin for this inspection period, or
No.
it will not?
No, we will have a robust informational period where we're just getting the community up to speed on what zone zero actually means.
Yeah.
And like Wendy said, we'll have time where we can send inspectors out to your home and tell you, here's where you're missing it. Here's a couple of more things you need to do. We'll have community forums. Well, you'll know everything you need to know about zone zero by the time it actually really gets implemented in 3 years.
Yeah. Another question, just several compliments about the great presentations from all parties, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
When Chief Covington and everyone else who's made presentations, when you talk about evacuation routes, are you talking about the main corridors, or like, Ascot, Shepherd Canyon, or are you also talking about some of the, branches of the tree that sort of spur off from those? And a couple of questions have come up as to whether, is there a map of sort of, official evacuation corridors that we can share with residents?
Yeah, so there are pre-designated evacuation routes that the city has adopted. So those are the evacuation routes that we're speaking of, but we're also speaking of, we know that there are, really get to know your community. You should know where you live. You should know 2 or 3 ways out of your community, even if it's not the main evacuation road. So right now we're working on clearing the adopted evacuation routes that the city has adopted, but we're also going to clear other routes that we know are highly traveled routes that people are going to use in the event of, you never know where the fire is coming from. So we have to clear all the evacuation routes, because we never know which direction people are going to need to use to get out of their communities. So, again, this is a process. This is years of deferred maintenance that we're, now have the funding to try and catch up on, but it's not going to happen in one season. So we're just starting, and then we're going to continue to do year over year, continue to do the work throughout the city.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the panelists. This has been great. Thank you so much for making time to, inform Piedmont Pine residents. We had, way over 100 participants, and we really appreciate your help with this super important topic. Oakland Firesafe Council.org is a site that you definitely want to visit, and also visit us at piedmontpines.org and join.
Peter, just to mention that 3 or 4 Mons in Piedmont Pines have become Firewise approved already. There's
Yes.
15 in the close to finishing, and we have 27 Mons, so we're almost halfway there. So it'd be great to have the whole PPNA Firewise.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
13 out of 27. So we're almost halfway there. And we're excited about that. So we want to finish that off. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Chief Covington. Thank you, Councilmember Janani Ramachandran, Elizabeth Stage, and Assistant Fire Marshal Smith. And thank you all you participants who've attended this forum. And with that, we're going to sign off. Have a great evening.